Hello, welcome to 46th edition of Airhacks TV and Happy New 2018, and may your wars were thinner than in 2017. And it actually looks good. More and more projects are based on thin wars, and more developers actually believe that you can just focus on standards and forget all the fancy frameworks. And they really enjoy it. This is the most important thing. So not every project, has to consist of artists. Okay, start with the topics. So first, a surprise. So I was quiet the last 3 weeks. So if you followed my Twitter account or my blog, nothing happened, and not even a vacations episode, which I did the last few years, was released. I actually planned to do something, but had absolutely no time. And the reason was the surprise. So what I recorded is the new web components online workshop. And this is the, you can consider as the second part of the Web Standards Igniter. In the Web Standards Igniter, I just focus on the web standards, CSS3, DOM, JavaScript API. And in the web components, I just show what you can do actually, how you can build your own custom elements, your own components, your own browser tags with behavior, and the browser tags communicate with each other with data binding, and events are distributed, and without any external dependencies. So I'm not relying on anything. I'm just using an editor. And this was the reason, actually. I had lot to do just to record that. How this is related to Java? Because it's the same spirit. What I like in Java the most, I just focus on business logic and forget all the dependencies. And the same I'm doing right now in my web projects. I'm not using any frameworks. I'm just using the web platform or web standards. So the web platforms or web standards, or the browser even, is for me the Java, as you will. And in some commercial projects, the developers also really enjoy it, because there are no migrations, and you have to learn once and never relearn again. So it's exactly the same as Java. The problem, of course, is because you don't have to migrate every 2 weeks, it's a little bit more boring, which is exactly the same as in Java. So forget about that. Then I think December the 12th or something like this, there was the regular airhacks.com workshops in Munich with lots of really nice attendees from all over the world. And I knew there were already some alumni or attendees who already attended Airhacks. And there were projects with thin wars, so wars are way smaller than 1 meg, lots of critical projects, and really interesting project. And the most interesting project, or the most interesting question, was one project was even forced by European law to have fast response times, and I didn't knew about the law. This was actually an interesting project. So I really enjoyed the 4 days in December. And the next workshops are already scheduled. And by the way, the workshops in March, so the web component workshop, so I didn't cover everything what I covered in Munich. So in my web component workshop just comprises the web components parts. And in Munich, I will also show you some techniques about service workers, web workers, asynchronous programming, and offline. And in the online course, I just focus on the custom elements. So there are already sufficient registrations to all the workshops, so they should take place in March, which is great. So thank you. Now, contents. First question, and this was actually a nice one. Someone is a student, Java application for school. He's basic CRUD Java application for school. And he would like to review me the app, which I actually did. I did it in December the first time. And today I just checked out the code again. And I found this December version better. And why, I'll show you in a second. And the problem is you cannot actually review an application without knowing what the intention is. So what is the intention of your app? This should be clearly stated, If this is basic CRUD, so this is completely over-engineered. But if there is something else going on which I don't know, it could be appropriate. So a basic advice, you cannot just show me code and say review this, because if I don't know what your goal is, it is really hard to review. So you should provide, in the README a short, in the GitHub README, a short goal list, what was your design considerations. But let's go to the code. So this is the app, Flight Manager. And I start always with POM XML. So just go to the POM. And it uses Java EE Web API. The first question is, why Java EE Web API and not full? I never used the Web API, so I would ask you why you are just restricting yourself to the Web API. It does not make any difference in the real world. Just go, if you have some time, watch my talk, lightweight versus heavyweight, so there should be no difference. Then Lombok. Why I'm using Lombok? This introduces additional complexity. In your case, you won't gain anything. Usually in project you can gain, you don't have to write hash code or equals if you really need it, or to string or getters and setters. Then I would put the properties at the end, and you created 3 modules: controller, entity, and boundary. There's a typo, boundary, so there is no A. So the question I would ask you in real-world projects, why you created 3 modules. If there will be no reasonable question, I will ask you to merge everything together in one war. So let's start with the boundary. So the boundary, there is parent, remove the parent. There is no need, in the parent to specify 2 dependencies in inherit from the dependencies, just adds additional complexity. I will remove the parent and put the dependencies here. Then the MariaDB, I have no idea why you need MariaDB here. MariaDB is a driver, a JDBC driver. It should be installed on the application server. Then there's an airport, and I guess the airport is session scope data. So session scope, our question, do you really need session? I would guess you need stateless. Data, no idea what data is. I guess it generates getters and setters or no idea what happens here. And named shouldn't be actually used, except it is used by GSF. And then I would rather use how it's called, backing beans with, for instance, model on it, and the backing beans would access the airport. And authentication, this is actually the same. And the question is why you are changing the name here. So I would just always rely on the naming conventions. Okay, so by the way, PrimeFace is a good choice, and I have no time to review the view, but I guess yes. So what I will do in your case, I will merge all the modules into one war, and then the airport becomes the airport facade, and I would introduce another package. Let's call it Flight Manager. So RO for Romania, I think. UVT. And by the way, I spent some time in Romania in projects, and what I know is Horinka, Palinka, and Zuitka. I think you should know what it is. So. And ROUVT.FlightManager.business, because we are in business and boundary. And then if you have GSF, I would introduce RO.UVT.FlightManager.presentation, and there will be the backing bean. So I would just have 2 classes, one which cares for as a backing bean, as a presentation view, and the other one which cares about the backend. And as you can already see, you have some name clashes. So there should be I don't know what the airport is doing. Right now, nothing. So there should be some, flight management or passenger scheduling, but just airport is too broad. Okay, cool. Controller. So the controller, there is an airport bean. The question is, I don't get the difference between the both. No, I know what it is. The boundary in your case is already the backing bean. So I think you should rename that, then named and session scope is right. So I would question whether session scope, okay. So it seems like the boundary in your case is already the view layer. So what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't add, what's also strange in your case, you have just the JSF part. So you don't have any REST services, which might be right. It's okay. So now I got you. So this is not. So then take it back. So, but what I will introduce is a package called presentation. This boundary is still one package for both, for the airport bean and the airport. There's no need to name beans bean. Everyone knows that stateless is a bean. I would rather call it, airport scheduler, flight manager, and whatever. So, cool. The same is for company bean. And rather than creating a package beans, I would rather introduce two packages. One probably company and the other one flights, or flights company itinerary, something like this. And if you look at the classes, they are all empty delegates. I would question them and remove them. And why you have the empty delegates? Because you have a DAO. And this usually happens. So if this is a simple CRUD app, I would just remove this layer or the DAO layer. And let's go to the where is it? So everything which looks like this is actually wrong from the Java perspective. No added value, just delegates to the next layer. Okay, what's here? Okay, this looks nice. It's simple. And now to the entities, and we have the DAO in own package, activate table, I think, extends persistence, active DAO, and so forth. In real-world commercial projects, I will consider this as a defect, this DAO package, except it has some specific purpose. We don't need DAOs anymore. So what you will do, you will just inject the entity manager. But you could have a specific requirements which I don't know. For instance, if you would like to access a non-standard database like MongoDB, or Mongo is already also covered, but let's say React or something else, then DAOs would make sense. But you are using straight JPA, so it's not needed. So we have the airport again. This is the airport entity, and you see no args data constructor. This is my personal opinion. I would, instead of using the annotations, I would prefer to have a constructor. So less magic. So I would even, even argue no magic development is the best possible thing. Company, it's the same. This looks everything reasonable. So, okay. So what I will advise you, merge everything together to a war, throw away all the framework classes and focus on business. Having said that, I don't know your professor. So if your goal is to show off, what I can do and some separation of concerns, then you get a very good, I think, evaluation from your prof. So you have to ask your professor. And your code looks like code from seasoned, enterprise developers. So it is clean, looks good. But I'm writing a different code. My code is a lot simpler. So I don't know exactly what your goal is. So before you refactor everything, and then you have to repeat the class, ask rather the professor and even add some layers to get a better evaluation. And after the school, you can remove all the stuff. Okay. So sorry for the negative comments. But they were my spontaneous thoughts. And by the way, I reviewed this already in December. And December it looked reasonable. You had one war and it looks good. So and now it looks a little bit too complicated for me for a simple CRUD. Okay, cool. So at the Munich airport workshops, they told me I have to switch the chat and the Twitter, and I did. This was a really nice improvement because now you can follow better the chat. So thank you for the feedback. And there was one attendee at the airhacks workshops in Munich who listened, or I think listened, to all airhacks TV episodes, all 45 episodes, and spent 45 hours. Listened, I don't know, in a few weeks to everything. So not bad. Cool. I think we covered this. So by the way, I really like code reviews. So if you're happy with my criticism, just put it here. By the way, what I think would be great student assignment, when another student could simplify as much as possible this flight manager and provide as clean code as possible without any external dependencies. So you would have, two versions of that. So versions history log of the entity JPA. So there are two possibilities. There is Hibernate Inverse and there is Eclipse JPA History. Both are similar. Inverse is a little bit more generic. So Inverse works internally with a hash map, and this is more type safe. And so both do the trick. And the question is how to handle the changes in entity. For example, when column is changed, remove different for history table. Not that different to what happens with the entity table. So you will have to maintain both tables at once. How to do this with, for instance, Liquibase or FlyawayDB. There are two tools which are almost standard for that. How to run tests in container with Arcalian, Glassfish embedded, or is it better remote or maybe another solutions? I would say another solutions. I think in my YouTube channel, there are lots of examples how to implement embedded tests without Arcalian and embedded solutions. And even in my testing online workshop, let's wait a second, airhacks.io. And there is, in the Java testing workshops, so I tested a lot without the container, and I just used Arcalian and Delta Spike and CDI unit for very specific cases. So and the code is on GitHub, so you can just take a look at that. Okay, and by the way, because I showed this in the URL in the airhacks FM podcast, there is an after December the 17th, I published another episode, Micro Java E, with Steve Millich, and this was from about Java beginnings, object-oriented programming, and how small or big Payara Micro is. So I got lots of questions about Payara Micro. So I asked the, I think he's CEO or CTO, founder and director of Payara. So this is the Mr. Payara itself, about, you know, the size difference between Payara Micro and Payara Server Full, and what the ideas behind are. So I think if you listen to the episode, you get even better answers than I can provide you, because I'm not Mr. Payara and Steve Millich is. Okay? So, cool, I hope it's covered. And thank you for listening. So I'm really surprised that I get so much praise, because it is not like I do, you know, a lot of additional work here. I'm just sharing my thoughts, and if you like it, it's really fine. So thank you. Two unrelated questions. See discussions about getting rid of EJB in favor of CDI. So the discussion is actually good and very productive. And you have to read this, the mailing list here. And there is also David Blevins from Tommy involved. And so what is my my opinion about EJB in favor of CDI? So my general opinion is we should delete as much as possible from Java E, but we only need one Java E. I'm not a big fan of having, you know, 50 different profiles, because it doesn't make any sense. So from my perspective, usability, convenience, and productivity are paramount. I'm really not interested in micro optimizations, because there's no gains for anyone. So having said that, right now in Java E7 and Java E8, EJBs are the most lightweight and most productive solution. Why? Because I get all the stereotypes for free. They are pullable, monitorable, I get transactions for free, I don't need any additional infrastructure, you know, producers and nothing, it just works everything out of the box. But what I would like better is to kill EJBs completely and provides a stereotype, let's call it stateless or something else. So let's invent a stereotype, the name is something else. And this something else stereotype would be a CDI stereotype and would come with all the cross-cutting concerns from EJBs. So you would get transactions, you could get pooling, you get monitoring features, and you can throttle the EJBs, and then I would just choose CDI and we could kill EJBs. But because the something else stereotype is not available right now, I still prefer EJBs, because I'm not interested in reinventing the wheel in every project, creating, you know, CDI which behaves like EJB without EJBs. But because at the end of the day, you get the EJBs anyway. So it's not like if I'm creating, if I'm emulating EJBs with CDI, EJB technology will disappear from your server. It still sits on the server and waits to be used. Okay. What is the best way to add metrics to my Java app? So it really depends which metrics, because I think the most valuable metrics are business metrics. And what business metrics are doing is they are counting, let's say, how many podcasts are downloaded, or how many blog posts are viewed, or how often is something bought or something rejected, or how often per day someone bought my book or canceled the order, or what is the temperature of something, right? And so in this particular case, the big deal is to write code to provide the metrics. So you need a business code which performs the calculation. So which implements the cockpit functionality. And if you just to expose this via Prometheus, it's trivial. So at the end of the day, you will have to have a string concatenation and create a Prometheus name. And if you're interested in it, take a look at Project Firehose. And I already mentioned the last episode. What Firehose does, it just reads JSON and creates on the fly the metrics. Yeah, it creates exactly this. So it creates the Prometheus format, which can be directly consumed by Prometheus. I actually implemented it live during the last airhacks.com workshop in Munich. So, and what I don't like, so there are Prometheus client libraries, but they have too many dependencies, and at the end of the day, they're just concatenating the strings. So, so this is what they provide some additional computations, but what you really need is just the Prometheus format. And I'm not in favor of interceptors, because what you get with interceptor, an interceptor can only count, the invocation of a methods. So this is what I usually also do, and how it works is for instance, what you get out of that is number of, or you get what I usually do, slowest method. I'm interested what were the slowest invocations, which method through which have thrown which exceptions, and yeah, this basically was, and then from there it evolves. And how it works is interceptor creates CDI events or calls directly and startup Singleton, which maintains a concurrent hash map, and in the concurrent hash map I maintain the statistics. Okay. Yeah, events could do the trick, but you will find yourself out star just with interceptor, which directly gets injected the Singleton concurrency management bean as EJB, and maintain the statistics there. And Eclipse micro profile addresses the issue as well. So if you have, for instance, the Eclipse Liberty profile, Open Liberty application server, you can activate the 1.2 micro profile and get these statistics out of the box, but they are not business statistics. Cool. I hope I answered the question. So let's see what happens here. No questions. No questions. Except Happy New Year. So Happy New Year to you as well. Now, if you see DAO as a defect, yes. Do you also think delta spike should not be used? So let's take a look at the delta spike. So what you get repository pattern, and what you can do, you can specify queries on interface, and then because of some magic, it can generate the implementation for you. You will get two dependencies. You have to declare two dependencies properly with some transitive dependencies. My first question would be how much slower the deployment gets. This is the most important question. If I add a dependency, I'll always measure the time before and after, because as I said, productivity is key. And then you will have to produce the entity manager. This I will consider as overhead. And and what you gain is you can create a repository and you get some annotations. And the question is, if I would just inject the entity manager and you would use this, who would be faster? And which solution comes with fewer lines of code? And if you are able to convince me with a very simple arguments like, look, if I will use this, my code is become simpler because it's obvious, then you should use it, absolutely. And actually someone in the project also mentioned recently delta spike, and I asked why, and there was no clear answer. It's just because decoupling or whatever, so who cares about decoupling? So this was like so actually what he wanted to say, because I would really like to use it. So this is, then use it. Okay, so this is actually my if I look at the code, for instance, you have to use transactional repository. In what I do in my EJB, if I control at stateless, not even stateless, there's one at stateless on the boundary level, and this just the transactions get inherited. So I would even argue the standard Java solution is simpler than this. Okay. And what I also like, having the queries on entities, because if you have entity flights and I open a class and I see all the queries on the entity, I really enjoy it. I don't think it is better to have the queries defined on the methods, because the entity is a domain object, and the queries could be considered as static methods of the entities. They are not on the entities rather than in the entity manager, but you could implement the queries as static methods on entities. Okay, so Klausheim saw my video, a little rest with JAX-RS 2.0 in Java 7. The video is quite old, but seems to be popular. And he asked me about asynchronous services. So I also opened the project. And there's developer, which... and by the way, this project is reasonable. So this is what I like. There are just developers resource and JAX-RS configuration. This is how simple CRUD should look like in Java 7. And developers resource. And what he tried to do is to use asynchronous, which comes with EJBs 3. And this seems not to work in his case. And what I would like to do instead is, and actually I did it. So if you go to YouTube, Adam Bean, and look at the code Java 8 with JAX-RS 2.1, so this is part of that. So if you look at this, I did something similar. So I used the completable future with managed executor service and combined that with asynchronous client. If you have Java 7, you don't have the asynchronous client part. But the solution is similar. Let's see whether I recorded something. So in the Java EE microservices part, I did it actually. There was I configured a completable future, so I described this in the workshop. But let's see whether there is an free solution. Just stop. And no, not here. And I'm pretty sure there is a video of how to use completable futures. So please take a look. Async. Not sure. So, but regardless, what you can do, you can inject managed executor service. Then you can create completable future, and then you can combine both the async response with a boundary. So this is how it usually should work. I hope this answers your question. Okay. Good one. Docker Swarm versus Kubernetes versus Openshift. Which is best in which scenario? So I would say Kubernetes won everything. So Kubernetes, everybody's darling. Everyone uses Kubernetes. Even Openshift. So with Openshift, you get Kubernetes, HR proxy, Docker, everything in one place. And Docker Swarm is similar to Kubernetes and Openshift. I would prefer Openshift or Kubernetes because Openshift contains Kubernetes. I like Openshift. Having said that, my next server will run on Kubernetes because I don't need Openshift for my projects. But my client's using Openshift, and this is actually great. You don't have to use the source-to-image paradigm. You can just use Openshift to deploy Docker images, so you are not forced to build from sources. Yeah. So thank you. So yeah, I would take a look at Kubernetes. If you're happy with Kubernetes, go for it. I think even installation of Openshift is simpler. Just take a look at Minishift. So you can install Openshift in and you have it on your machine. So yeah. So next one is good one about stateless bean spools. So the question, boys, that's an interesting one. So what it means is, so the question one is very good question if you think about this. Is it better to have one EJB with four methods, or four EJBs with one method, which is better in terms of scalability? So, and you cannot answer the questions right away because if you're just using simple Java calculations, you have to use one EJB. But if something happens there, let's say you are calling database, which something takes longer than, let's say, 100 milliseconds or 50 milliseconds, then it becomes interesting because if you have four EJBs, each method invocation is an instance, and they are independent from each other. So they are you get in parallel four instances of EJBs, and if you have four instances in parallel, you get a little bit of queuing, so it could scale better. How much better? I wouldn't expect more than 10 to 20%. And what you also gained is monitoring. Then you get one EJB, one monitoring endpoint per EJB, and you can look at how many EJBs are active at time. So you will see how many parallel additions, multiplications, or divisions is going on. So, but I would probably start with four methods first. And if you're interested, and it has to be a high performance solution, high scalability. So performance, it would be always better in one class. But scalability, if you leverage some pooling or you need throttling, then the four instances, or yeah, not instances, four classes, and then four instances might be better. And at runtime, there will be no four instances, there will be far more instances. So from performance consideration, memory considerations, of course, four classes will take more memory than one. Okay, and the next one. As a freelancer, you need to teach yourself. This is true, and I really enjoy it. How do you keep up with so many technologies that update constantly? What are your sources? And this is about, why I'm still sane, right? So mentally healthy, I would consider myself. So this is subjective, but at least I'm happy, right? And it started early, actually. I think in 1997. So 1995 was not that crazy. 1997, 1998 was more and more crazy. And this was like even more crazy than JavaScript right now, the JavaScript ecosystem. There were like, millions of consultants, and they wanted to take over the world. So it means like artificial intelligence, AI is nothing against that, what happened before. So actually, I remember in one meeting, there was a company who claimed that they can implement with plain HTML in Netscape version 3 and virtual e-commerce assistant. This was like, a small creature in browser who would suggest, what stuff to buy, and they said there would be no problem to implement that. And I couldn't get it. So how you can tell it? I don't even know how to start, right? And then after a few iterations, they found out that it would be not that easy. And the idea was that they planned, to create a back office center, and they wanted to remote control the the small creatures, how is it called, virtual assistants with real persons. So it's like a chat applications. So I say, okay, it's just crazy. I mean, and what I find out is that lots of technologies was just marketing and just not honest. And what I did then, I just focused on the basics and standards. So this is why I really like Java. It didn't change a lot in the last 20 years, I would say. And everything comes back to Java somehow. So whatever you look at, it's really similar. So even if you look at serverless, serverless technology, it looks to me like, exploded application server. But this is it solves exactly the same problem which is solved for 20 years. So it's not like I have to relearn everything. I think the most challenging part is not to forget old things. So if you are able not to forget things, then you'll be successful and you don't have to learn anything new except some new buzzwords. So, but this is pretty easy to learn, and because most of the buzzwords are funny, like no SQL, and everyone wanted to have SQL, like serverless, and there are of course servers everywhere. Or what was it? Web 2.0 was also funny. So there was actually no one knew what it actually is. Or SOA, service-oriented architectures, and there was no definition of a service. So this was the history of software development is actually very funny. Okay, let's see. No questions. So what happens with you in 2018? So you are in 2017. There was lots more questions, right? So next one. This is my friend from Java 1. So I told the story several times. It was still funny. He asked me to have a drink, and I say, okay, we are not at Oktoberfest, but what he wanted to have is a coffee. And I just said, no, I don't drinking here. Is Java 1. And I just took a coffee and I met him. It's like, he told me you don't drinking anything. It's like, but coffee always, right? Okay, and he asked me, WebSockets or SSE, server send events. And I would go, yeah. Hard to tell, right? Why? Because SSE comes with JAX-OS. If you have already a JAX-OS endpoint, I would start with SSE because there's almost nothing to do. This is just fully integrated with JAX-OS. WebSockets is complete different channel, or at least additional class, which will care about WebSockets. Then, WebSockets are binary and very efficient for small messages. SSE is also efficient, but it goes over HTTP. So I think with SSE you get less trouble with stringent firewalls. And WebSockets can cause more problems in firewalls and proxy servers and stuff like this. So if you don't have JAX-OS in place, I would start with WebSockets. And if you have already JAX-OS resources and this SSE endpoint just fits well to the JAX-OS, I would go with SSE. For long-living client-to-server connections, yes. I mean, they are. WebSockets is like almost like a session, and SSE is also like a session, and it even maintains like a reconnect timeout. Yeah, stock update for products. I mean, WebSockets sounds to me as very natural choice. So thank you, and yeah, I hope so. Both are good. WebSockets, and they're also well integrated in browsers. And yeah. Questions? No questions? No questions. What is that? Also no questions. Okay. Then Scooter. I want to, the idea is writing XMMP chat server with Java, how to do this. And what I proposed is connectors, adambean.com, ready to use connector implementation. I wrote it for Java 6. Works well, but yeah, it's a component which you have to care about and is of course complicated. So the question is, would I start with that? No, and what I almost forgot about this, look at eFTP. I actually wrote it for one of my clients. and absolutely forgot to announce that. So it was open sourced a few years ago. It's called E2FTP. And what it is this is an FTP server which runs on Java 7. And therefore, it also has to care about ServerSockets or at least threads. And is on each, if you upload a file, you get notifications via CDI events. So it's tightly integrated with CDI. So and I don't think I used this 4 years ago. Connectors back then. I also used stateless startup singletons to maintain the sockets. So what I would do is start a bean, singleton bean with concurrency management bean. This is what I will start with, and manage executor service and ready to go. Nothing will happen. And by the way, the statement is, I think, wrong, because only stateful session beans are passivate. There is nothing to passivate in stateless EJBs. There can be just because they are just not passivated. It's not called passivation. Only stateful session beans are passivated. This is the stateless EJBs. They can just return to a pool, and yeah, that's the problem with stateful session beans. With singletons, they are not passivated. It's like singletons is like stateless with one instance, and this bothers me because only stateful are passivated, and stateless is not called passivation. They are returned to the 3 pool and then taken from the 3 pool. And if they cannot be passivated, what happens then is they will never return to the pool, and in singleton bean will never return to the pool. So no one cares about that. So go with singleton, and it works well. Works really well. So. Okay, so where is my gist? So, questions. Yeah, and what you could use the implementation, how it's called, I haven't forgot, Historics, Porcupine. If you go to my to GitHub and look for Porcupine, you will get an injectable executor service, which is based on managed executor service, and you get additional statistics if you're interested. Okay, cool. So now, Happy New Year to you as well. And here seems like Glassfish is not working with that, and the question is whether I now know a workaround. And I don't know it. What I would do is I will use Payara and then open an issue. This is a possibility, because if Whitefly works and Payara doesn't, it's somehow strange, because Hibernate Validator is the reference implementation and Weld is the CDI implementation, and both are, Whitefly and Payara are using both. Okay, so I will double check that. So I didn't have time to do this, but what I will do is try it with Payara 5, the latest one, and open an issue at GitHub Payara account. So this question, there's actually 2 questions. The first one, if I'm using Java util logging, then there is no way in this case to separate the application server logging from your logging. What I would do, the question is, this is now a longer conversation. My argument is, why you would log to a file, write to a file anyway? Because if you're running a cloud container, there's actually no access to the file system. Isn't it better to write it somewhere else? And if you would, and even FileBeat to Elk, what we did in the last workshop at Airport Munich, I implemented from scratch a simple logger without any framework. It was just a functional interface, or one method, which logged directly to Elastic. So and then we used Kibana for analyzing the data. So it was very simple. So I don't think for elk. So the question is why you should write first to a log file and then use FileBeat to read the log file and to write to elk if there is to write to Elastic if there is possibility just to write directly to Elastic. So this is what I would consider. And if your logs are that crucial that that nothing can get lost, then I would write directly to database anyway. For instance, if you have JDBC, write to a database. Okay, when you deploy an ear or word to a client, so how to obfuscate a code. So obfuscating code should work on application servers. We did it a few years ago, but for, I don't know, the last projects, no more, I think 10 years ago or something like this. And what is the best way to add license to your Java applications? And this is actually funny because we had to do this once. And we used the Java security to mimic the license functionality, because you have to think about this. You could have licensed and unlicensed user, and a licensed user can access different more stuff in the application than an unlicensed user. So this might help you. And if you obfuscate the code, it should work. It should work because the code is obfuscated first and then deployed. And the application server will generate the dynamic proxies and everything in using the obfuscated code as base. So because there are no deployment descriptors, this would be a problem. If you had deployment descriptors, XML, and inside the deployment descriptors you would have references to class names, and they are no more available because the name was changed by the obfuscator, then you are in trouble. But on application servers, modern application servers, there are no more XML, no deployment descriptors, no configuration files, and the only thing which remains is the bytecode, and the application server does not care whether the name of the bin is airport or A42. Okay, thank you. And this is also a good one. So basically, he wanted to have a PR class from Jakarta Commons, and this is interesting. Why it doesn't open? And the question is, the PR class. So this is actually is a key or value or just two attributes, and what is the big deal? So if you just need the pair class, why you don't write the pair class? What you can also do, in JavaFX has a pair class. And on some application servers, it can cause some warnings, but a JavaFX comes with a pair implementation. So if you say JavaFX pair, and JavaFX comes with, so it's also Java util pair. And this is valid implementation, so you could absolutely use it. So in one project we use it, and then the application server had some warnings, so we just reused the code without JavaFX. Okay. So for me, just having pair is not a reason to introduce external library, but this is what we should argue about. Is it really worth to be dependent on Jakarta Commons something just to have the pair class? But if you, for instance, for security or whatever, which is harder to implement, then never reinvent the wheel. Use something which is proven and standard. So 39 minutes ago, how to organize role-based access to JAX resources. What it means actually. I would say look at Soteria samples. This is Soteria JSR, I think 375, GitHub. There should be some examples about security and role-based access, and lots of examples. You should look at that. Because how to organize, I don't know what your requirement is or what's your, no idea. what your requirements are, with and which roles you need. Because there's nothing to organize. It's just part of Java EE. If you integrate the authentication authorization, you can either introduce your realm or use authentication mechanism from Java 8, and then you are known as the principal or as the role, and then you are set. So there is nothing to do rather than thinking about the role names and which role is allowed what to do, and I don't know the requirements. But sometimes what happens is, probably is this the question, that we have to authenticate using my client's database, but we are not allowed to write anything to the database, so we use our own database for authorization, and then we manage the roles by ourselves, and then every project is a little bit different. A good book on unit testing. I don't think there are pragmatic books about unit testing, because every book on unit testing just, praises unit testing. And in practice, I'm not a huge fan of 100% code coverage. So, and the question is how to test JAX-Server's resources. I think how to test JAX-Server's resources, I covered it extensively in the Java testing workshop, and without any framework. And just to show that it also works, I use the Jersey testing extension, but I don't use it in real world projects, but I just show you this in the workshop. So if you're interested, take a look at that. And in this course, if you go to the repository Java testing, you will find all the examples for free, so you don't even have to buy the course. So in the course I explained this, but here you see Jersey test framework. So this is JAX-Server's resource testing, and yeah, just take a look at that. And what I usually do, you see here monitoring, ST is the system test, and monitoring, I always have a dedicated projects which cares about the system tests, and I'm not a huge fan of embedded tests. What I usually do, I have one war which is binary the same for all stages, and I deploy it as soon as possible, and then I have another module which performs black box tests. This is what usually happens in my projects. And sometimes in more complicated projects, we implement simulators to simulate a backend system or something like this. Okay. Yeah. And a good book on unit testing. So if you are really interested in unit testing, write the classic book, read the classic books from, I think it was Kent Beck and all the early extreme programming books, because they show the best techniques, so you get an idea what it is actually. And I always try to read several books. Don't read one book. If you're interested in a topic, read as much as possible about this, and then you get a better idea. Just one book is not a very good idea. Okay, now we are done. Let's see. Any questions here? No questions here. If immutable objects are good. So Ali asked me. Simple and offer benefits in concurrent programming. Why do programmers keep creating mutable objects? Well, this is like, the question is like you cannot answer the question properly, right? Because you are saying if immutable objects are good. I mean, what it means, immutable objects. So immutable object means it can never change. And if you look at the Java EE6 JSON API, it was immutable. So you couldn't change the already existing object, which was painful. So it was good, but hard to use. Java 7 is a little bit more mutable, and is Java 7 was immutable, and Java 8 is a little bit more mutable, which is way easier to use. Exactly. And in Java 7, or in Java in general, actually most objects are immutable, right? Because if you think about this, everything lives for the duration for a request. And it's not like you're keeping your object in the session. So the whole immutability applies more if you are building standalone applications or your own servers. In Java EE, everything starts with a request. So you get the objects, JSON objects or entities. They are stored in a database and you are set. So there is not like you are keeping the object between requests and they're mutating the objects. So most of the objects are immutable anyway in Java EE. That therefore no one speaks about immutable objects in Java EE. And done it right, then you need the framework support. So what most of the frameworks are doing, they give you an object and a collection, for instance, and then if you modify the collections, they apply just the changes to the origin collection. It's not like they are copying everything. So what you will need is a library support. So then is the question which library to choose and so forth. The question is not stupid, but you know, it is. I can always ask, like, if lambdas are good and closures were available in 1970s with how it's called, forgot the programming language, Lisp. Why we have Java? Right? This is a very similar question. So, yeah, because you know there are people who didn't like Lisp, and this is always the same. So yeah, I hope I answered your question properly. So and for instance, what I mentioned today is with the events, right? So we have a Singleton with concurrency management bean, and I said use concurrent hash map. And concurrent hash map is kind of immutable. So what happens behind the scenes, you have a region in the hash maps and we change something, you're changing the region. Or what you would use, copy and write array set is also a immutable data structure. So yeah, most of the programmers are using it, at least in Java scope. So thank you for watching. Check out YouTube channel. It's something I submitted some new videos, and if you like, check out the web components series. And yeah, see you in January. I will create the events for 2018. It's always the same, first Monday of the month, except there is something special going on. And yeah, thank you for all the questions, and thank you for the I have a lot of fun in 2017 with you. And yeah, enjoy Java EE, and may your wars be thin. Thank you. Bye.